behind her as the boy yanked her bag free. God, all the work she did at home last night. Those discs were in her purse. Chelsea pushed herself up off the sidewalk, kicked off her other shoe, and ran after them. They were nearly a block ahead of her, but she could think of nothing but all those hours of work, and she ran faster. And then it happened. With a squeal of tires, a white delivery truck bounced over the curb right onto the sidewalk in front of the three kids. The driver swung himself out the open door of the cab, landing directly on top of the tallest boy. The kid was no match for a full-grown man, and the truck driver was extremely full-grown. All it took was an almost nonchalant backhanded blow, and the big kid went down, her shoulder bag pulled free from his hands. But the dog boy and the kid with the nose ring were both behind the man. Chelsea saw a glint of sunlight reflect off the blade of a knife. "Look out!" she shouted, and the man turned. The way he moved was graceful, like a choreographed dance, as he disarmed the kid with a well-placed sweep of his foot. He moved threateningly toward the dog boy, who turned tail and ran after his friends. Chelsea slowed to a stop, aware that her heart was pounding, that her pantyhose were torn, her clothes askew, her hair loosened from her usual French braid and dangling around her shoulders, aware that the soles of her feet burned and stung from her shoeless run down the rough city sidewalk. She had to bend over to catch her breath, hands braced above her bruised knees. She tilted her head to look up at the man who'd rescued her handbag. He looked even taller from this position, his shoulders impossibly broad. He was dressed in well-faded blue jeans and worn white leather athletic shoes. He wore a Boston Red Sox cap backward over a dark head of unruly curls and a T-shirt that proclaimed in large red letters, "I'm too sexy for my shirt." Given a leather jacket and a studded dog collar, he could have been those kids' older and far more dangerous brother. "You all right?" he asked her, moving closer, his dark eyes even darker with concern. "You need me to call the paramedics?" Chelsea shook her head no, taking quick stock of her bruises and scrapes. Both knees were bleeding slightly, as were both elbows and the heel of one hand. The top of her right foot and most of those toes were sore. Her neck felt raw where the strap of her purse had given her a burn. "I'm okay." She straightened up, trying to tuck her blouse back into her skirt, trying to ignore the fact that her hands were shaking so hard she couldn't get the job done. The man didn't ignore it. "Maybe you should sit down." Chelsea nodded. "Sit down. That would be good." She let him lead her across the sidewalk to a building that had a stone stairway going up to the front entrance. He helped her sit on the third step up, then sat next to her, setting her handbag between them and pulling off his baseball cap. She glanced at him, aware that he was gazing at her. He wasn't what she'd call classically handsome. His nose was big and crooked, as if it had been broken one too many times. His cheekbones were rugged and angular, showcasing a pair of liquid brown, heavily lidded eyes. His mouth was generously wide, with full, sensuous lips that seemed on the verge of a smile. His hair was dark and curly and long, and as he steadily returned her curious gaze, he pulled it back into a ponytail at the nape of his neck. "I've seen you around the neighborhood for a couple of weeks," he told her. His voice was deep and husky, with more than a hint of urban Boston coloring it. "You opened up that computer consulting business around the corner, right?" She nodded. She hadn't seen him around. She would have remembered. "I'm Chelsea Spencer." She held out her hand. "I know," he said, finally letting his smile loose as he gently